What happens when a dangerous symbiote is born inside a serial killer? Can Eddie and Venom stand up to this threat, or will Carnage destroy the world? Get ready, because what you're about to see is just the beginning. The story starts in 1996 at an orphanage, where we meet Cletus, a serial killer who is imprisoned along with his girlfriend, Frances. Frances possesses superpowers. Cletus asks her what the doctors have said, and she replies that they are planning to move her to another facility for research. Soon after, guards come to take Frances away. On the way, she uses her powers to attack the guards, but one of them shoots her, injuring her eye. Years later, Frances is confined in Ravencroft, a mental institution, where doctors take strict precautions while delivering her food to avoid being attacked by her powers. Every day, she receives a newspaper where she follows the news about her boyfriend, Cletus, who is still in prison, awaiting his fate, which could be the death penalty. Meanwhile, Eddie Brock is continuing his work as a journalist. We learn that Cletus wants to speak with Eddie, as it might help uncover information about some dead bodies. Detective Patrick encourages Eddie to meet Cletus in prison. During their meeting, Cletus tells Eddie that he wants to send a message to his fans in exchange for sharing his life story and secrets. Cletus then shares a cryptic sentence that he wants on the front page of the newspaper. As Eddie is leaving, he notices some strange drawings in Cletus's cell. Venom copies these drawings and, after some internet research, discovers that they reveal the location where Cletus has buried his victims. The police recover the bodies, and Eddie becomes famous for solving the cold case. However, Detective Patrick is upset because Eddie solved a case that had been unsolved for years, which now provides all the evidence needed to sentence Cletus to death. That night, Eddie and Venom have a disagreement. Venom wants to go out and catch criminals so he can eat them, tired of living off chickens. The next day, Eddie's ex-girlfriend Annie calls him and they meet. Annie reveals that she's engaged to Dan. She asks if Venom is still with him, and Eddie lies, saying Venom is gone. Annie suspects Venom is still with Eddie, so she tells Venom to take care of him. Eddie is heartbroken over Annie's engagement and spends the night brooding. The next morning, Venom tries to cheer up Eddie by making breakfast. They then receive a letter from Cletus, who writes about killing his entire family and being sent to an orphanage where he was bullied. He mentions meeting Frances there, and how they fell in love. Cletus blames Eddie for his death sentence and asks to meet one last time. Eddie visits Cletus in prison, where Cletus provokes him, causing Venom to lash out and attack. During the scuffle, Cletus manages to bite Eddie's hand, ingesting some of Venom's blood. The guards quickly intervene and take Eddie away. Unbeknownst to Eddie, the symbiote in Venom's blood has now entered Cletus's system. Back home, Eddie and Venom get into a heated argument. Eddie blames Venom for the incident with Cletus, saying they could have been exposed and arrested. The argument escalates, and in a fit of anger, Venom leaves Eddie's body and goes off on his own. Meanwhile, back in prison, Cletus is being executed by lethal injection. However, the symbiote in his blood reacts, preventing the poison from taking effect, and Cletus transforms into Carnage. Just as Venom is to Eddie, Carnage is now bonded with Cletus, and he goes on a rampage, killing guards and freeing inmates before escaping from prison. News quickly spreads that Cletus has escaped, and Detective Patrick becomes suspicious of Eddie, believing he might be involved. Meanwhile, with Carnage's help, Cletus finds and frees Frances from her confinement. They reunite, and Cletus introduces Frances to Carnage. Together, they escape, killing several police officers in the process. Patrick arrests Eddie, suspecting his involvement with Cletus's escape. Eddie calls Annie, who comes to the police station. Eddie explains to Annie that Venom left him, and they need to find him to stop Cletus, who now has a symbiote of his own. Annie agrees to help and starts searching for Venom. Venom, who has been jumping from host to host, eventually ends up in the body of Mrs. Chan, a shopkeeper. After some persuasion, Annie convinces Venom to return to Eddie, as both miss each other. Venom agrees and reunites with Eddie, helping him escape from jail. Meanwhile, Cletus and Frances, now bonded with Carnage, plan to take revenge on Eddie and anyone else who stands in their way. Cletus kidnaps Detective Patrick, while Frances goes to Eddie's apartment, where she finds a photo of Annie. She tracks down Annie, kidnaps her, and leaves a message for Eddie, inviting him to their wedding. Cletus and Frances take Annie to a church, where they plan to get married. They hold Patrick and Annie captive. Eddie arrives at the church, but as soon as he sees Carnage, he gets scared and Venom retreats into his body. Venom warns Eddie that Carnage is incredibly powerful. Despite the fear, Venom and Carnage engage in a brutal battle. Carnage, being much stronger, overpowers Venom. Meanwhile, Frances uses her sonic scream to attack, which weakens both Carnage and Venom, as symbiotes are vulnerable to high-frequency sounds. Realizing this, Dan arrives and sets Carnage on fire using kerosene, giving Venom a chance to fight back. In the chaos, Venom accidentally hits the church bell, which rings loudly, separating the symbiotes from their hosts, Eddie and Cletus. With their symbiotes gone, Eddie and Cletus begin to fight. Cletus attacks Eddie viciously, but Venom returns just in time to save him. The fight between Venom and Carnage continues, but Carnage is too powerful and seriously injures Venom. Carnage captures Annie and climbs to the top of the church, intending to drop her to her death. However, Venom manages to catch Annie before she hits the ground and save her life. Frances, regaining consciousness, uses her powers once more to disrupt Carnage, but Carnage retaliates by throwing her off the church. As she falls, her scream generates powerful sonic vibrations, causing the church bell to ring and the building to collapse. The symbiotes are forced out of Eddie and Cletus's bodies once again. Venom merges back with Eddie and defeats Carnage, finally killing him and devouring Cletus. The police arrive, but Eddie and Venom manage to escape. In the aftermath, Detective Patrick, who survived the ordeal, begins to exhibit signs of having a symbiote of his own. The movie ends with Eddie and Venom reflecting on their victory, knowing that the world is safe for now, but with symbiotes still out there, who knows what dangers lie ahead. Stay tuned for the next movie recap. Until then, take care.